So anyway, when I was 5, one day, I saw the ice cream van arrive. I heard the music. I got excited. I was ready to get an ice cream. And then I was brutally told that when the ice cream van plays music, there is no more ice cream. So sad. So, the relationship I have with gastronomy maybe didn't have the best start, but it improved over the years greatly. I am not an executive food science influencer. I'm not a gastro-trendologist. I'm not a bon viveur. I'm Gavin. I'm a chef. I've had the pleasure to work with some of the finest chefs in Italy and in Lithuania. But let's go back to what we mean by gastronomy. Gastronomy has a very simple definition. We can look at the art of choosing, cooking, and eating good food. Also, good living, art, culture. To this, I would add identity, belonging, and an intimate relationship. Lithuania is a country which is about to experience, or starting to experience, a sort of gastronomic revolution. Why would we need a gastronomic revolution? Firstly, any nation or any region, any place, which is starting to experience a gastronomic revolution is at risk of inheriting a dysfunctional culinary system. I'll explain what I mean by that a little bit later. The second reason, more broadly, is that we, as a globe, waste 30% of all food that is produced. So what I want to talk to you about are trends, more specifically, sustainability, and how you, the customer, can affect these. Now, I mentioned that I like to cook, so let me invite you to my table. Whoa. That was quick, my goodness. It's lunchtime already. Yes! Yeah, almost there. Go on, next one. There we go, that's it. Yes. I love it. Okay, now, what I like to cook, I like to keep it simple. That's just my personal preference. I like to keep it simple. I like fresh ingredients. I like something neatly presented so that the customer can identify it straight away. I like seasonality. You can't have the same dish all time of the year. And also, I like to use local products wherever possible and do them justice by cooking them to absolute perfection. Now, the modern chef has to keep up to date. Recipes and cooking methods have to be modernized. It's the same how it works in fashion or technology. It's no different with this. Because if we don't, then we're taking a big risk to get stuck in the past. To illustrate this point, let's have a look at some of the delights from 40 years ago. Ooh, a ham and bananas hollandaise. Yummy. It almost makes you think that ham and pineapple on a pizza is not so bad. It is. How about a nice Frankfurter Spectacular? But look, this is for people who were watching their weight. All right, okay, so there's no way the world will ever return to these absolute monstrosities. It's true. But you get my point. However, there is a different risk there. Now, think of trends again. I want to go back to that idea of a dysfunctional culinary system. Let me give you an example of that. One thing that I find difficult and quite suffocating is, in fact, the amount of sauce that people put on my plate. It's just massacred in sauce. I mean, there's so much sauce in there, but oh, look, they put some extra sauce on the side. Good idea, chef. Now you're thinking. Or maybe we've got this. Come on. How can I, as a customer, have a relationship with my food if I can't see it? How can I identify that? Maybe some of you quite like burgers. I can just feel my arteries clog up just looking at it. I mean, a burger is not the healthiest thing to eat anyway, but what are they doing to this? You'll have a heart attack if you even look at it face to face. So one thing I want to explain is a trend. And the idea is to just use less sauce on a product. If a product is good, don't touch it. Hold that thought. We'll come back to that. Innovation, innovation. Coco Chanel once said, one cannot always innovate. I want to create classics. And she was right. To give an example of a food trend, take the example of olive oil. Olive oil in the late 70s and early 80s became a trend, became quite popular. People were interested. Olive oil is in most people's kitchens now. It's a trend which lasted. It was something useful that people could hold on to. It's a big industry, and it's a good industry. So, in order to modernize, chefs have to innovate. But it's very, very clear that there is a bad distinction happening, and we're not differentiating between the idea of an innovation and a gimmick. A gimmick, as you see, is a trick or device intended to attract attention, publicity, or trade. It's a fad, something which is temporarily popular. It can't last. Now, let me give you an example of a gimmick. A burger on a shovel. I know what you're thinking. Some of you, in fact, might be thinking, it's kind of funny, it's quite kitsch. Maybe you'll go there, you have a laugh. The next time you'll invite your friends because it's food on a shovel. Yeah, the third time you're bored. Done. Gone. It's a gimmick. That does nothing for the identity of a burger, and it does nothing to the diner's enjoyment. If we compare that with another trend, always regarding burgers, I like my burgers. Again, with presentation, a wooden board. A wooden board. Simple, honest, and that is how we imagine burgers to be served now. That's part of it. We see that, we recognize it. We go to a gastro pub, we expect the wooden board. So it was a trend which had longevity, something which could last. This is a trend which is sustainable. There's that word again. Sustainability. Sustainability, let's clear up the definition. The ability to be maintained at a certain rate or level. Now, some people think when they hear the word sustainability, they think about the environment, so they think about recycling perhaps. And that's true, that's absolutely true. But it is not limited to that. Let's take the examples of what we saw before, the idea of the burger, serving it on a wooden board. It's a sustainable idea because it creates an identity, a visual identity of how a burger should be served. That's a small idea. A larger idea, we go back to the sauce. With the sauce, this actually, if you use too much sauce, you stop one product being the star of the show. And why is that a problem? Let's take an example of duck. Oh, I like my duck. The region around Kaunas has some of the best duck in the Baltic states. It's delicious. But how do we know it's the best if it's absolutely massacred with sauce? How can we say it's the best if we can't really taste it? So what you've got is a product that can be marketed as made in Lithuania, so that people can be proud, and this creates a sustainable concept which can be used in generations to come. That's what I mean by sustainability in terms of practices. This is something which will help us for generations, and not only the quality of a product. Also, we can look at sustainability which impacts the environment. Recently, I was in Denmark, and I worked with these guys, and they grew oyster mushrooms. And they grow these from used coffee. That's it, used coffee. I was intrigued, I was excited. How does that work? And they showed me the process. They sell the oyster mushrooms to restaurants, to markets, etc. And with what remains of the coffee, they turn it into fertilizer. It really excites me. If a restaurant had just one idea like that, it would be such an exciting selling point. It's not a gimmick. It's something which helps the environment. Why should you care? Why should you care about sustainability? Is there a bigger picture? Well, actually, yes, there is. A number of multinational companies working across the European Union, they have certain sustainable practices. For example, it could be reducing the use of paper in the company. In order to create a collaboration with these larger corporations, companies have to comply with their sustainable practices, their procedures. And if they don't, then there will not be collaborators. Lithuania has responded very well to this call. But here we're talking about multinational corporations, big businesses. It trickles down to small businesses and restaurants. And this is where you come in. The customer has more power to push a trend than we realize. For example, a friend of mine, Italian, he makes some of the best pizza in Kaunas, in Lithuania. It's fantastic. He's Italian. So would he put pineapple on a pizza? No. No. But he does put his pineapple on his pizzas because the customer wants it, and it's one of his biggest selling pizzas. Regardless of my opinion of pineapple on pizzas, it sells. The customer has made an Italian create a pizza with pineapple on it. That is an example of the positive influence that a customer can have. Does that change his cultural identity? Is it not an Italian pizza just because it's got pineapple? Nothing to do with it, because it's still a pizza. He maintains the cultural identity. The customers recognize it as Italian food. What can you do? Well, the first thing I would suggest people do is think about your favorite places, the favorite places you go to eat, the places you go to drink. Start a dialogue with these restaurants. Ask them about sustainable practices. Are they doing anything? Ask them, are they using local ingredients, which supports the idea of made in Lithuania, of made in Kaunas. Talk to the chefs. Discuss these things with them. Don't ever be afraid of a chef. We are reasonable people. Sorry. Talk to them. Approach them. And communicating with people at a restaurant or who own a restaurant, it doesn't mean this big formal feather quill written letter with a wax seal on it, hand delivered by a serf. No. Use your social media. They've all got Facebook pages, they've got websites. Contact them through that. Contact them that way. They will reply if you have an objective question. Don't be a critic. Don't be one of these keyboard warriors.
I didn't like that. Why was it wrong?
Be objective about it. Be enthusiastic when you communicate with them. Focus in one particular ingredient. What do you think about that? Work with it. Building up that communication starts to create a kind of community that restaurants have with their customer base. Bless you. It's crucially important also to keep your eyes open. Be aware of what sustainability is. Look what's happening in the news. Think about changes which are taking place. It's easy to find this information online. Easy. It's very, very easy. Take one example which has been very popular. It's really trended recently, and it's the discourse about plastic straws. You may or may not have heard of it. I hope so. But even that, it started as a trend which is sustainable and beneficial to the planet. And you can see it even here in Kaunas. You can see that there are paper straws or things like that. And then the reaction's great. You get people who are actively involved. They talk to the bars. Why don't you get paper straws? And then you get the second category of people who are quite passive, but they just roll with it. They accept it because they can see it's a good progression. Then, of course, you've got the third category, this absolute minority, who just want to complain. Why can't I drink my Fanta with a plastic straw? It's like, okay, another question. You are an adult. Why are you drinking with a straw anyway? So what I really want to share with you, the whole point of this, is to offer you a way of thinking. Think about how you can approach your restaurants. Engage in conversation with people at the market. Talk about these things. Get a little bit involved in it. Build that community so it's not separated between restaurant and customer. That is an integral part of the gastronomic revolution in Lithuania. It will improve your experience dining. It'll improve the gastronomic situation in Lithuania, really put it on the map. And it'll really help our planet. So, my relationship with gastronomy is constantly evolving. It's constantly changing. The idea of sharing this way of thinking with you is, of course, not the end of my relationship with gastronomy, but it is the end of my talk. Thank you.